Mrs. Tinker and I were in an antique store the other day, and I saw an old countertop display with a rounded glass front. It was very similar to the ones you see here. I told Mrs. Tinker at the time, I'm going to make me one of those. I don't know what I'm going to put in it, but I want to see if I can do it. So, let's get started. I had some pieces of 1-inch thick southern yellow pine. I thought I'd make it out of that. First I got to cut all the pieces to length. And now on the table saw I'm ripping them to width. To make our bottom piece, we have to glue a couple of boards together. To help make this joint strong, we're going to use biscuits, cut with my biscuit cutter. A biscuit cutter, also known as a plate joiner, has a spinning saw blade that's spring loaded. And as you push it into the side of the wood, it cuts a little half-moon shaped pocket. You cut these pockets in the edges of both of the boards to be joined. We make sure that they line up by making a mark across both of them. I did that at the very beginning. Now it's time to install the biscuits. This is a biscuit, a number 20 biscuit to be precise. They come in 3 sizes. Now we put a little glue down in each biscuit hole and a little glue on the edge, and then with a bunch of clamps, we clamp it up and let it dry. Now let's turn our attention to the sides of the countertop display box. I'm using the same 1-inch thick southern yellow pine. First I'm cutting it to length, and now I'm ripping it to width. I want the front edge of this to be rounded, so using a bucket as my guide, I'm just making a radius. We want to be able to cut that radius at the same time on both sides. So after clamping the sides together and drilling a pilot hole, I'm going to screw them together with a few short screws. Now taking them over to the bandsaw, we're going to cut this radius out. And because they're screwed together, we're cutting both at the same time. Now to clean up this curve, let's go over to the oscillating drum sander. One inch thick was fine for the bottom, but it's a little too much for the sides. So after several passes through the planer, I get them down to the thickness that I like. I've installed an 1/8 inch straight cutting bit in my router along with a collar. That collar will ride along this template I've cut out of plywood. I'm going to temporarily screw it to each side. Now using the router, following the template, I'm putting an 1/8 inch groove on the inside of each of the sides of our display. This will accept the plexiglass later. I'll also have to do a similar groove on the bottom piece where this intersects, but we'll do that later. Let's unclamp our bottom and give it a light sanding. To put a decorative edge on our bottom, I've installed an OG bit in the router. Many of the antique countertop displays I saw online had this same OG detail on the edge. And a little sandpaper cleans it right up. Now for the underside, I'm going to use a roundover bit just to ease that edge so it's not so sharp. Now we need to cut the sides to length. This also cuts off those holes that were used to screw them together. Now we're going to use the round over bit to ease the edges of the sides as well. Now for a little assembly. We're using carpenter's glue here, and I've got a straight edge to make sure everything is parallel. I'm going to tack it with some brads, and we'll come back and screw it in a minute. To make sure both sides are parallel to each other, I've got a gauge stick. It allows me to tack the front edge, and then when I flip it around and insert it in the back edge, I know that they're both exactly the same distance apart. Now we're going to secure them with some screws. We've cut a cross member to connect the back edge, but we have to put a groove in it to accept the plexi. That's what we just did here. Now with it clamped in place temporarily, we're going to pre-drill and install some screws. The last board we need to cut for the display case is the door in the back. Here I'm ripping it to width out of a piece of the 1-inch southern yellow pine. Now I'm cutting it to length on the miter saw. And once again, we're going to plane it down to a little bit thinner thickness. And we see how it fits. Well, unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this video, but we've made good progress. Next time, we'll install the hinges and the pull on the door. We'll stain the display box. We'll add the acrylic glass. We'll also build a tray on the inside and do a few more things. You sure don't want to miss the next video. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching.